You wake up in complete silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind where sound itself feels frozen. The air is so cold it burns your throat before you even breathe fully. There are no roads, no lights, no hospitals, no phones. Just endless white stretching farther than your eyes can understand. And somewhere out there, something goes wrong.
A fall, a wound, a sudden sickness. Back then, there is no number to call, no help arriving in minutes. So the question becomes terrifyingly simple. When something goes wrong in a world like this, how do you survive long enough to be saved? Or worse, who is even coming?
At first, you might think the answer is obvious. People helped each other. Simple. But the Ice Age world doesn't reward simple. It punishes delay. It punishes weakness. Even a small injury wasn't small. A twisted ankle didn't mean rest. It meant isolation. And isolation meant something else entirely. Not being found again. Because out there, distance wasn't measured in kilometers.
It was measured in time. Hours to walk. Days to reach another group. And in freezing wind, time didn't move gently. It cut. So when someone got hurt, the real emergency wasn't the injury. It was the silence that followed. The waiting. The question no one could answer. Will they still be alive when help arrives? But here's where the story twists. Humans didn't survive because help was fast. They survived because help was already there, in a form we barely recognize today.
Not hospitals, not systems. Something far more fragile and far more powerful. A group, a circle of people who never left. But that creates a new problem. What happens when the entire group is starving, or migrating, or forced to move because the ice itself begins to shift? Now, help doesn't just delay, it disappears. And suddenly, survival becomes a calculation no one is prepared to make.
Do you stay with the injured, or do you leave them behind so everyone else doesn't die? But something strange begins to emerge in these harsh decisions. Humans start building invisible systems, not written, not spoken as rules, but lived. Signals in behavior, patterns of trust.
Certain people becoming the watchers, others becoming the carriers, someone always staying back when others moved. And this is where things get even more surprising, because help didn't always come from your own group. Sometimes it came from strangers, which raises a terrifying question. Why would a stranger risk their life for you in a world where resources are already disappearing? The answer isn't kindness. Not at first. It's memory. Humans begin to remember each other across distance.
A face. A trade. A shared fire. A past debt. And slowly, something new forms in survival history. The earliest version of emergency support. Not systems, not institutions, but relationships stretched across. Survival itself. And when those connections fail, that's when the real danger begins. Because now, injury doesn't just threaten one life. It threatens the entire chain of trust holding the group together. One failure spreads fear. Fear spreads distance. Distance destroys survival.
What looks like primitive life was actually a fragile network.
Every person was both vulnerable and a lifeline for someone else, even without phones, even without tools.
Humans built something invisible, but powerful. A social emergency system. Not because they understood it, but because without it, they simply wouldn't last another winter.
So when we ask how people got help in an emergency before phones, the answer was never about speed. It was about connection. Not the kind you dial, the kind you live inside. Because in the Ice Age, survival didn't depend on how fast help could reach you. It depended on whether you were part of a world that would still remember you existed. And maybe the real shock is this: we never stopped relying on that system. We just made it invisible.